Okay, so I will. The main goal of this talk is to show, usually to people from biology or engineer from microscopy platform, that they can use this kind of model and that it's not so difficult to practically to set up such a model. So first I will motivate why to use this model, and then I will go through the different steps you have to fill when you want to use this in practice. So the motivation is, okay, I came from the, let's say, Markov random field community. So it was, let's say, in the 80s and 90s, and the main argument to use this Markov or Gibbs field was to say that when you have noise in your data, when you have some texture in your image, then if you take the information on 1 pixel, you cannot do a lot, so you have to take into account what we call contextual information. So it means that you basically you take some statistic on small window around 1 point. And then during the 80s, we have a very high resolution sensor, especially in remote sensing, but also in biology. And then we can remark that this contextual information is not enough. For instance, if you take this image, on top left, if you want to characterize this image, there is not much information in the contextual information. So you can say, okay, it's more or less white, but that's all what you can say. But of course, if I ask you to describe this scene, you will say, okay, there are some rectangular objects which are white and with a kind of a disposition. So it means that the main information that you can get from this is the shape information. And here that this city is built with a rectangular object. If you go on the right, and if you want to detect the road, so if you take let's say contextual information, what you will say that along the road you have some homogeneity, and then you have some heterogeneity in the orthogonal to the road. So it's typical contextual information. You take 1 pixel, and you look what is in the neighbors. But here, if you take this kind of image where you have a very high resolution, in fact, if you look in the middle, there is a big part of the road that you cannot see. Okay, it's just because it's a shadow due to the trees. So in fact, in this area, which is about 50 pixels long, then the contextual information is not enough to describe the road. And of course, if I ask you to try to draw the road, I guess all of you will make the junction between the two parts. So why we do this? Because again, we have a higher level interpretation, and we think of the road network as some geometrical object, and we know that, for instance, except in some very special case, a road goes from somewhere and go to another place without interruption. So this is typically the kind of what we call geometric information, and that we would like to embed, to put into our Markov model. So last example, if you take on the bottom, you have 3 near-infrared image which represent some trees. And if you want to detect trees, you cannot rely only on the contextual information, because, for instance, you have some, on the middle you have some grass, and then here you have the same kind of contextual information that in the trees, because it's chlorophylla also in trees. And so why you are able to make the distinction? Because you know that a tree from above is more or less elliptic or disc shape, and then you use the geometric information to make the decision. So the main motivation to use this kind of model is to, again, to take into account this geometric information. But also what we would like is to keep the good advantage of Markov models, Markov fields or Gibbs field, that we can embed some prior information into our model. Okay, so we would like to be able to define some geometric information, but also to define some interaction between the object. For instance, if you have a population of trees which is made by a human, you know that there is a kind of periodicity. If you consider the road network, you know, and you can model this by segment, but you know that this segment should be connected and so on. So we would like to embed this kind of interaction. And the last point, of course, it's good to have a nice model, but in practice, if you want to use it, you have to be able to to derive some algorithm to make the optimization at least, simulation and optimization. So one way to do this is to use the Mark point process framework. Okay, just to motivate, here is very briefly some kind of result. So here, if you want to detect the trees on left, so again, if you look this without knowing that it's trees, I guess you more interpret this as strips rather than different individuals, because the trees are very close together. So in this direction, you will see like a strip. But if you know that what you are searching for is some elliptic object, but then you can get this kind of segmentation, of detection. Another example, here it's a problem of counting flamingo. And the problem is here, these flamingos are living on the sand. They are not so pink. So the contrast is not very high. And you can, if you, moreover, they are close together, so they can form some clusters. So if you don't have some prior information on the shape of the flamingos, then you have a bad counting. Finally, again, here it's a problem of counting boats. And if you don't have some prior information on the object and on the repartition of object, you will have some false alarm on the K, I don't know English, the part between the boats. Okay, so now let's say this work was done in Ariana group of José Zeroubi a few years ago. And now I would like to focus on some specific problem in biological images and show that this framework can be adapted to solve different issues of these images. So what are the issues which are linked with this kind of image, even if it's not reserved to this kind of image, but at least the problem are here. So first is how to address the intensity heterogeneity. So when you consider living material, so you have always a lot of variability. And it's also true in the signal intensity. When you take microscopic images, even within one cell, you have very different kind of intensity. So if you base your approach only of this intensity, even if you take contextual information, your algorithm will not behave in the same way depending on where you are working on your cell. So you have to address this challenge. Another problem is that it's not always as simple as what I show you. The different example I showed you before, it was you have some background and then some object on it. But again, when you take some usual microscopy images, you have one object of interest, but you have a lot of different objects around this object of interest. So of course, if you want to detect some specific objects, some specific cells, for instance, or vesicle within cells, then you cannot just detect some signal, but you have some signals, some objects which are nuisance parameters and which should not be detected. Third issue, you may have, depending on application, but a very high density of objects and possibly some clustering of objects. Okay, so how to separate the different objects within clusters. Again, when you speak about biological material, you have a high variability, so you have to address this when you make a model. And in some application, you have very tiny objects. So for instance, as Charles shows some spots, you can have some vesicle within cells. And even if you have very high resolution microscope, usually these vesicles are composed of very few pixels. So it's a problem how to address geometry when you have only a few pixels. And finally, you can have a very huge data set, which can be 2D, 3D, or even 3D plus T. So you have, especially if you have some engineering perspective, you must have in mind that computational time can be an issue. Okay, so let's go step by step, and again, in a very practical way, what you had to solve when you want to use this kind of model. So the first thing you have to solve is to define what is your configuration space. So to define first what are your shape space. So here is some some simple examples. So usually, in most cases, we define some parametric shape. Why? Because then you have to sample the number of objects, so a point process, but also to sample this mark. So if you have too many marks, too many parameters to estimate per object, then of course it will be heavy to handle. So this means that, okay, if you are, usually people say, okay, why you will use a disk if you can use ellipse? Because ellipse are more general, and so why you don't use this? Well, you will use a small set of parameters by defining, for instance, a minimum radius and maximum radius, and not so big. So one answer can be that if you use here some ellipse, but in left I have reduced the space of marks, and on the right I take much more wide shape space. So if I was correct and I really optimized my model, on the right I should have the same result as on the left. But because this configuration is a very deep local minima, and we'll see this when we talk about optimization, then in practice I can use this kind of, I can get this kind of thing. So here we will see it's because in my MC scheme I didn't define the good movement to go from left to, sorry, from right to left. But again, one way, in practical way to prevent this is to properly define your shape space. Okay. So then this shape space will define the mark of your object, and then to set the object in the image, a configuration will be some unordered set of points. Okay, so the configuration space is a union of omega n, where omega n is a set of n points in the space. Okay. So next step is to define, if I want to sample some model, to define the reference measure. So this is quite important because in most cases we forget about this, and usually when we talk about Markov field in image processing, we just speak about the density, we define the density, but we forget that we have in fact some reference measure. So in the case of mark point process, the usual reference measure is a Poisson measure. So the Poisson measure basically is non-informative measure, so you can control the density of points, but these points are independent and uniformly distributed within your space. So okay, you can forget about this, and later if you don't want to make mathematics, only define your density. But also you can put information inside this, this reference measure. So for instance, in this case of tree detection, what we can do is just to keep the Poisson measure, but with a non-homogeneous density function, and to put this density, which will depend on some vegetation index that you can compute on your image. So what will be the advantage of doing this? It means that when you will sample your model, so independently of your density, you will sample with respect to this measure. So you will more likely try to put points or trees within the area which are white here, so we have high index vegetation. So you have higher probability to try to put trees where you have some chlorophyll in this case. So okay, this information you can say, okay, why you don't put this in your prior? You favor some trees where you have some chlorophyll. But the problem if you do this in your prior, you will have some false alarm in the prairie when you have some grass. So here I will sample in the space more likely where I can find some tree, but I will not constrain to put tree when there is chlorophyll. Okay, so here it's a good opportunity, in fact, to solve the trade-off of Bayesian approach when you put some prior, because the problem is always what force I give to my prior with respect to my data. And here, if you have some information that, for instance, you expect to find something somewhere, but if it is not, you don't want to constrain it, then this information, you can put it in your reference function, in your reference measure. Okay, so once you did this, so again you put all what you expect to find, but that you don't want to force. Okay. So then you will define, once you have this, the next step is to define your density. So as usual, you split your density into two terms, which one is the prior, and second one is what I call the data term or fidelity, And we will see that, okay, usually this data term is defined by the likelihood, but we will see that it's not always the best way to use the likelihood to define this term. And, okay, we'll see later some detail on this. And when you have this define your density, then you can compute some optimization, which is a usual case. So we see one over algorithm, but usually you take a sampler and you embed this in a simulated annealing, and then you sample your density power 1 of T and make a decrease the temperature. So if you look a little bit this usual way to do, in fact, at the beginning of your algorithm, when the temperature is big, basically what you are sampling is just your reference measure. Okay, so your density has no information because it tends to uniform density, so you sample your reference measure. So as we say, it means that if you have some information in this reference measure, you will not sample uniformly your configuration space, but you will focus on specific area. And then when the temperature decreases, then this converges to a Dirac distribution on the global maxima. So as the temperature is decreasing, then you don't care about the reference measure. The main point is the density. So again, the result will only depend on your density, but the path you use to get this result, so the speed of your optimization, will also depend on this reference measure. Okay, so the prior, what is here the main point of this slide is, yes, to say this biologist and engineer that the Markov property is very nice because in fact, in practice, what you work only on some pairwise interaction or a few objects, but a finite number of objects. And then it's very easy to model different things. For instance, if you don't want your object to be to overlap, then you just have to consider two objects and compute, for instance, the area of overlapping, and then it's very, let's say, common mathematics even for biology. So for instance, one example here is if you take two disks, it's very fast to estimate if two disks are overlapping or not. You just take the distance between center, and if it's lower than the sum of radius. But even with ellipse, it's much more harder, much more longer. And basically what you have to do is to consider a mask, a discrete mask of each ellipse, and to see if there are some common pixels. So again, using simple object as disk can have some advantage because it will be much faster. So you always have to think if you need or not to make complex. Okay, so it's easy to define overlapping, it's easy to define alignment or favor some orientation and so on. And you just have to take this into. But be careful, because for instance, here in this case, I want to detect the road network. So what we did here, so we took some segments. We say in the prior, we would like the segments to be connected to each other. So we define the ball and say if the two balls at the end of a segment intersect, we favor this solution. We can control the angle between segments. And for instance, if we are not in the mountain, favor some alignment, some small curvature road. And for the crossing here, we define that we prefer some crossing on P on 2. Okay, so that's the result we can get. So here what is, okay, it's a little bit shifted, but what is very good is that we have filled the hole in the middle because of the connectivity prior. So even if we have the shadow of trees, we have filled this place. But if you look, okay, yes. If you look this junction, so here it's in fact there is some contrast because very small parts. So it was not so difficult to address this. But why we didn't get it? Because we say in our prior we prefer to have some intersection and P on 2. So it means that your prior have a very big influence on your result. So here it was a bad idea because in fact if you take some highway or all this kind of thing, usually when one road goes to the highway you don't go like this. Maybe in Italy, but otherwise you must have some tangential. No, because in Italy it's very So usually you have a lot of tangential road, and here it was not taken into account in our model. Okay. So it's very important because when you use this, for instance, for biological application, and then you make some statistics and want to show different things on the shape of your object, the number of your object, you must think that maybe what you are computing is what you put in your prior model. Okay, then the data term. So it's the last part of the model. So let's say classical way is to use a likelihood. So you consider that you know the solution, and then you define the probability to have this image, this data, knowing that you get your solution. So for instance, if you detect objects, then you can have a product of every pixel which are inside some object, and a product on every pixel which are outside of the project of the object. And then here you can put why I put one. Okay, you can put your for instance Gaussian density if you suppose that your intensity is Gaussian or whatever. But here nobody obliges you to do this. You can also say, okay, what I want to do in fact is just to detect some object. So and I know that there are a lot of things in my image. So using this first approach can be difficult because, okay, maybe I can have some likelihood of my object because I can characterize the intensity of my object, but my background can be very heterogeneous. I can have a lot of objects, so usually I have some problem to do it. So in fact, if I put some geometry in my model, why don't put some geometry inside my data term? And for instance, I can just define the dissimilarity function between pixel inside my object and pixel outside my object. And here I can say, okay, I want to find white ellipses or light ellipses in my image, so then compute, for instance, a distance between the statistic of pixel inside object and inside around the border. So again, if I use this, if I have some different objects but which are not elliptically shaped, then I will not detect them. Okay. I can also really want to be completely geometric, and for instance, instead of using the intensity value, I can compute the gradient on the border and see if the gradient is consistent with the normal of my object. Then I have a purely geometric term also to detect. So of course it has some importance because if I take for instance, a real likelihood, so I consider pixel inside object with some radiometric model and pixel outside, I get this result on left. So to detect 3, it's okay, but on the left part, I have in fact, because my prior is to define disk and to make them close together, so I have paved the plane with disk. So of course, if I count then the object, it will be fewer. So here, if I take more what I call detector terms, so I take some statistics, some distance between the radiometry inside and in the border, I can get this kind of result. So you don't see, but there are some ellipses around the object. Okay. So you can say, okay, maybe you can segment the population and then detect, but you can see that in the middle here there is some part where the trees are not are dead. Okay, so it's important not to detect this thing. So for instance, we had some application to detect some eucalyptus, and it was very huge area. And the people who manage population, it was in Brazil, so they were about 2,000 kilometers from their plantation. So they want, if they go to make something, to plant, they want to be sure that there is a deal to do it. Okay. Okay, so now I have my model. So the last step is how to optimize the model. So again, the classical way is to use metropolis hashing things. So it was so the classical metropolis hashing was generalized in 1995 by comment il s'appelle déjà? Okay, it will come back. Voilà, Peter Green. Okay, so it means that we can use this kind of model also with this kind of process. So the main difficulty is that if you add some object or remove some object, then you change the dimension of your configuration. So to go from classical Metropolis hasting, we have to go to this RG reversible jump Metropolis hasting. Okay, so but it's the same idea. So the idea is you have some configuration, you make a small perturbation, and then you look if you keep or not this small perturbation. If it's good for you, so it's better for your model, you keep it, and if it's not good, you keep it with some probability to escape some local minima. But here the problem is, okay, that's nice in theory, but what kind of perturbation we can do? In usual Markov field, you can change the value of 1 pixel, and that's it. But here, so one thing is that you must be able, of course, to change the number of objects in your configuration, because you must be able to go from any configuration to any other configuration. So it means that you need to be able to add, so what is called birth an object, and to remove an object. But if you only have these two kernels in your algorithm, you can easily understand that it will take some time, because it means that you have by chance to add the good object with the good marks at the good place. So you will have to try a lot of possibility before getting the good solution. So it means that you have to add more moves. So some kind of move is classical Metropolis hasting. So you just change an object, so you can move it, translate it, delete it, rotate it, and whatever. But also you have to be able to work on more complex movement, like splitting and merging some objects. So when I say this, it doesn't look so difficult, but then the problem is that you have to compute this acceptation ratio, and it becomes very fast, very tricky to define such to compute such acceptation ratio. So this is so it was working, but we have to find new algorithm. Another problem is that when you put this in simulated annealing, as soon as the temperature go down, then you accept, let's say, bad choice with very small probability. So for instance, if you take the road network problem, your prior will penalize very highly if you have one single segment. Because it's not in practice, you cannot have one single segment. But to begin one road, you have to have one single segment, at least for beginning. So if you are not careful and you decrease the temperature, at some moment you are not able to add any new segment. So if you have one part of one tronçon of the road network which is not detecting, then it's lost, you will not get back. Okay? So it means that using this, you have to be very careful on tuning the temperature parameter, and sometimes it takes a lot of time. So the idea was, can we do something else? And okay. Okay, it was inverse. So one possibility is to, in fact, we have generalized the Langevin dynamics in the same way as from MCMC you go to RG-MCMC. Here we begin from the Langevin dynamics, and we include some kernels to add and to remove objects. Okay, so there is two parts. We define the associated stochastic differential equation, shows the convergence, and then define the discretization of the time to get a proper algorithm. And if we play on this discretization of time, in fact, we are able at one iteration not to propose to add one object, but to add a collection of objects. So the idea is that we are able to shake our system much more than with RG-MCMC. So in this algorithm, you have two main parts in one iteration. In the first part, you add a lot of objects, and you can add, you add this object, you can add with some different probability, and there is no rejection at this stage. So even at low temperature, you can add a lot of objects. Okay, so you can still shake your system even at low temperature. And then the second step, it's a depth step when you take each object and you delete it or not with some probability which is computed in order to get the convergence. So this is the theoretical part, and in fact in the def, if you write on the paper, in the def it's just a product on all objects of this def step. But product is commutative, so if you are in practical way, what you will do, you will try to remove first the bad object. So you can add some, the second part here, so you add the object and then you sort the object in order to put in the first candidate the worst one and try to kill them and so on. And we can show that this, so here, in fact, you can see this delta, in fact, is a discretization step of the time. And we can show that we have still also some numerical scheme for decreasing the temperature in order to get the convergence property. So here, again, the main point is that we work not on one or two objects, as for RGMCMC, but we had a lot of objects. And then we can still add this object at low temperature, so still move a little bit our system at low temperature. Yes, the drawback is that we have only birth and death, and we don't have a different movement. But why not mixing both algorithms? Okay, so anyway, what you can in practice, what you can see with this is it's much less sensible to the decreasing of the temperature because you are able to check it. So in practice, it's very important because you don't need to be very careful about tuning your decreasing of temperature. Finally, we can, if we follow what has been done in Markov random field, so after people say, okay, stochastic algorithms are good, but they are slow, so they define some approximation using deterministic algorithm like GraphCut. So here we have, okay, we can say, let's take the multiple birth and death, and instead of using this probabilistic death, let's get an approximation using GraphCut. So we replace the death step by a GraphCut algorithm. So the idea is that we will put some random variable 0 or 1 on each object. If it's a 0, we will, for instance, kill it, and if it's 1, we will keep it. So, and then you have a binary field, and we can use the usual GraphCut. But for the classical, for the GraphCut, we need some property which says that the energy of which is called the convexity constraint, that E of 0, 0, please, so here it's the energy, please, E of 1, 1 should be less than this. Okay, so it means that it works with attractive model, but not with repulsive model. But if you consider this means to keep the object, and this means to kill him, or the reverse. So usually what you have during your optimization, you have this kind of configuration. So you have two objects around some area, and basically usually what you want to do is to keep the best one, because usually they are in a more or less good position. So if you consider this equation, it means that you prefer in your model either to kill both or to keep both. Okay, so it means that the model we use in practice does not satisfy this thing. So in fact, there is a trick to avoid this, is to say I will separate my configuration of disk of object in two parts. So for instance, one part is the current configuration, and the second part is the new one. And then it's so here it's yellow, green, and red. And we can say for the red one, 1 means to survive, and for the green one, 0 means to survive. So then we can get this kind of inequality. So here the main advantage, in a computational time, in practice, it's not so faster than multiple birth and death, but you avoid all this simulated annealing thing. And for a lot of people, it's very useful not to have to deal with this temperature parameter. Okay, so now just a few results, and to show how to address this issue I use in the first part of my talk. So the first illustration is to handle with heterogeneity. So on left is synthetical images where you put some higher intensity in the middle, so it's a kind of optical deformation of the intensity. And on the left, it's a cell where you can see here it's the nucleus of the cell. And what you are interested in is to detect all these spots inside the image. So in fact, it's some lipid spot, and we study how much time they need to go from out to go inside the cells. And basically, behind this study is to show that if you have some things like omega-3, it's better for the cell, and it's better. You have better penetration of the vehicle. So as you can see here, in the background, there are, for instance, here it's much darker than here, so you have a lot of heterogeneity. But here, as we detect objects with respect to what we just say we want it brighter than the surround, then it doesn't care about the absolute value of intensity. So here the problem is that we have some objects which are of interest, and here in this application it was this red thing. So in fact this is a dendrite, and what we are searching, detecting is what is called the spine of dendrite, so it's some small ball which are around the dendrite, and they are important because the synapses are connected here. Again, if you don't take care, and if you use only radiometry and even some contrast here, some edge property, but then of course you will detect a lot of false alarm inside the dendrite. So again, using this geometric property of the object, but also of the object with respect to the background, you can have this kind of detection. So here you can see that it's, if you take, it's very close to the resolution, because here you really have a few pixels to define the spine. So here, how to generate, to handle with clusters. So it's some synthetical data here, but so here you can see some clusters. So if you use, if you don't use a particle geometry, then you can this kind of detection. So for instance, for a particle analyzer, so you just basically threshold the image, and then you select particle with respect to their size or their circularity parameters. So depending on what you use, you either keep this one or remove all of it, because you don't have more information. And using the information that you know here, it's something like rice, then you can split the cluster in a proper way. So here it's work about shape variability. So here we have a problem because it's what is called a spheroid. So it's let's say synthetical tumor. I don't know if some biologists will complain about this. But here, so you have some cells. And the problem is, so it's cancer cells, but the problem is that you have a very different shape. So we have a problem, for instance, for our framework, because up to now I have defined only some parametric object. So here it's not ellipse, it's not rectangle, it's not even a super quadric. So we have a problem here, but what we can do is to define some dictionary of candidates. So for instance, you can take all the level sets of this image, and then it gives some candidate. You can take your favorite segmentation algorithm or different one and apply on this image, and you take all what you detect as candidate, and then you can build your mark point process on this dictionary. So in this case, you can get a much better result. And what was interesting here is that here we take some different segmentation. So one is based on watershed, one is based on active contour, and so on. And the final result we obtained, in fact, it was a combination of all these things. So it's also good in terms of segmentation. So here there is not one best method for every shape. And if you mix them, then you can have a combination of all the methods. Okay, here, last issue was when you have very small objects. So of course, the geometry do not make sense when you have 5 pixels to say, is it a disk, is it an ellipse? But again, you can define the dictionary. So here we have defined a dictionary of shapes which are included in a 5 by 5 square, so with some constraint of connectivity and so on. And then when we sample the model, we can, instead of sampling the mark, we can take some object inside this dictionary. So of course, this can be done only for small shape, because then you have some complexity problem because of a number of shapes. But at least it means that we can, in this case of small spots, have a good detection even if you cannot really define the proper geometry, again, because it's too small with respect to the resolution. Okay, and last example here, it's, in fact, I mean, it's not the good result, but you can use, of course, some 3D object and then have detection. For instance, here it was a Drosophila larva. And the idea is to compute the number of cells and to follow this during the growth of it. Okay. Yes, finally, okay, if you want to compare, we have recently compared for detecting small particles. So here it's a part of cytoplasm inside cell, and we want to, it's a nematode, some kind of worm. And in fact, what we want to study is the effect of putting this worm on heat, so between 20 degrees and 30 degrees, and see what is the effect on this ARN particle. Okay, so we can, the idea is to show, again, when you speak to biologists, usually they use this IMARIS thing, which is based basically on local minima, local maxima, sorry, and to show that if you use a more sophisticated approach, you can get a better result. And here you can see, so in this particular case, we are better than IC, and that's why I show this one, but in some different application, it can be the reverse. But again, the main idea is that to take into account some geometry and some more sophisticated thing, you can increase your result with respect to, let's say, standard technique for biologists. And the nice point is that to get this, you need to pay 10,000 euros, and to get this, you don't have to pay. So here, for instance, in this application, if you take the previous model with dictionary, because here the particles are bigger, you have very bad results. So again, of course, when you set your model, you have to be careful and to have some information about how to do it. So maybe it's more complicated when using IMARIS, when you just have some threshold and okay, so the main conclusion is that it's quite general framework to, again, to take the advantage of a geometric model, but also to keep the advantage of a probabilistic model for modeling variability, interaction between objects. So now it's a bit, yes, parallel with the rest, but I always put this and never do it. So, but at least the new algorithm now it's not so long. So for this kind of application, we get the result in less than 1 minute. So it's not 1 second as other thing, but it's affordable. And we try to put it as open source software. So again, if you the same as IC you can get for free, but if you use what is used usually, it's 10,000 every year because you have to renew the license and so on. So thank you very much.
Is there any question?
Interesting work. Do you think that mathematical morphology will be interesting in your application or not?
Yes, it can be. Sometimes it's a good way to define some prior or some movement. So, for instance, when I say you can change the mark of the object, usually you can propose to delete or to erode the object and things like this. So basically, yes, it's not done, but I think it could be interesting to see this as a kind of stochastic mathematical morphology or something like this. The point again is here. So mathematical morphology could be helpful to define the data term. Then what is, again, good is to put some interaction like I did in...
And do you think that it's easy to mix the two, the stochastic with mathematical morphology?
In a dirty way, I think it's easy. So if I can, because in fact we can use some when you define your model. But then if your question is how to to define the rigorous mathematical framework, then I'm not sure it's so easy. But again, in practice, why not? And in one application here, it's what we can do. We use some watershed segmentation with a different value, and then we select the good part of each watershed with respect to this model. But the idea is, again, yes, to use geometry, so mathematical morphology in a stochastic manner, yes. But to do it properly mathematically, I'm not sure it's so easy.
I have another question. Thank you, interesting talk. So in the approach, you're talking about identifying features of interest, whether that's cells or trees, based on their geometry. Could you talk a little bit more about how you identify the shape you're looking for? Like, is it generating the libraries, or is it like mathematical or by eye? Just any comments or explanation, please.
Mm-hmm. So one, of course, it's an issue because in fact, I show that it's important if you take wrong shape and so on. So one of my combat fight, in some sense, is to say that we need a really multidisciplinarity. So for such model, if you do it yourself and you don't know what you are searching for, it will be not good. So here, you really need to construct to beat your model. For instance, here with the biologist, when we work for biology. So it's really an issue because, of course, then it's easy to say this, but in practice, it means that you have to define, let's say, some common language, and so this is not always clear. But yes, usually the guy who take care of forest or the biologist know what they are searching for, so they can put some variability, but you need them to define the shape, but also to define the interaction and things like this.
Thank you. I'm a statistician working in remote sensing, so I understand the multidisciplinary challenge. Thanks.
I have a question. Yes, sir. I have a question. The multi-region results obtained are very good. But I have a question: how you check the accuracy of your method? Which tool you are using to check the accuracy of segmentation results?
So yes, it's a problem not of my method, but of all our methods. So. Okay, there is two ways to do it. The first way is to make some synthetical data. So that's what Charles shows. So then you have a ground truth. You know, for instance, if you detect some object, you can make some simulation of this object. So you know where they are, and you have some ground truth. So you can compare the ground truth with what you get. So it's good because of this ground truth, but then your simulation is only some simulation. So it's not, you can always argue that you don't take the good noise model and so on. So the second way is to use the expert and to trust the expert. So for instance, this vesicle thing, we ask one biologist or several to do it by hand on a few examples. And then it's only way, so we know it's not ground truth, but if you take several biologists, you can compute the variability between the biologists and so on. So for instance, for this Flamingo application, they did this every year. So they take the population on big poster and put some pins, so they have this. And what they know that let's say, they consider that there is a problem with the population if there is a decrease of 5%. So they say if your count is close to us, if the difference between you and your algorithm and their count is lower than a couple of percent, then it's okay to take the decision. So it's this kind of thing. But again, yes, when you take living, okay, maybe if you take remote sensing, you always can go on place and see if there are tree or not. But when you make biology, it's difficult.
So how you measure the variability on slide number 11? You have explained to measure the intensity variability.
The variability of?
Variability in homogeneity, heterogeneity, intensity. How do you measure this? On slide number 11, you have mentioned a formula.
11?
Yeah, this one, the last one.
So, in general, what I say, how to manage the variability is that I don't try to model it. No, because it's too difficult to model background. So I say, okay, what I want, I just want to detect some objects. So for me, the information is So it's not here, but for instance, you take some ellipse, I define some term which say I want to find light or white ellipse in a darker background. And that's it. But I don't have model of background. So yes, maybe it's not a good answer, but my way to manage the variability is not to try to model it.
It works. So thank you again. And I think we'll stop here.